Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It has been a while. I went back and forth on being like, did anybody even notice I was gone? To like, let's talk a lot about why I was gone. And I'm settling somewhere in the middle. It's been about 4 months since I posted a YouTube video. I was celebrating 1,000 subscribers. I was doing so good. Cannot express to you guys how well I was doing this summer. And some of y'all might know that I live in Appalachia. I live in Western North Carolina. Maybe you've forgotten about this by now, but we got hit by the worst fucking storm to ever hit our area, Hurricane Helene. Totally decimated my area. I am super, super lucky that my house, my family, that we're safe. I live in a part of town that wasn't as affected, but literally like miles down the street from me is completely washed away. And 3-4 months later, over 100 days later, is still pretty fucking desolate. So I guess I am talking about it a little. It feels ridiculous to not address it at all. It has been really tough the past couple months to try to find some sense of normalcy, and thankfully reading has been there for me through all of this, and I've come out the other side finding a new, not a new appreciation for literature, but regaining my appreciation that maybe has waned a little bit. That's where I've been. Thankfully, I am doing a lot better. Things are kind of, I really hesitate to say are coming back, like getting back to normal, because they aren't. But things are getting better in my area. But I'm okay. Thank you to everybody who has reached out to me and asked how I'm doing. I'm doing all right. Things are hard, but they are getting better. And we gotta figure it out. I will put some GoFundMe links. Hello. I'm gonna put some links for fundraising and mutual aid in the description, because even though the media has moved on from talking about what happened here, it is far from over. It's a long journey. It's gonna be a long journey back to wherever we were before. But yeah, that's where I've been. Long intro. Anyways, let's move away from that. Let's talk about some fucking books, because I have really, really missed BookTube lately. I have been watching a lot of wrap-ups. I have been working on my own, and I'm really excited to share it with you guys, because part of, even though I was gone for so long, I got a lot of books to talk to you about. And here's what's crazy. My goal this year was originally 100 books, as it tends to be. Then I knocked it down to 50 because I was super burnt out in my last semester of college. It wasn't happening. I wasn't enjoying reading. I didn't even hit 50, guys. I read 46 books this year, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. I am speeding up my reading already and really enjoying it a lot more, and I'm hoping that will make me, I'm hoping to post a lot more book content in the future. I want to do like a TBR and stuff. Anyways, we are well enough into the video that it is time to talk to you about my best and worst books of 2024 out of the 46 books that I read. I have 10 great books to share with you. Some are 4-star, some are 5-star. And then I have 5 not very good books to share with you. And we're just gonna talk about them. I will be referencing my iPad. They're also in no specific order. I'll tell you my favorites, like which ones are like really up there. And I do think I have one like best book of the year, so we'll talk about that as well. But let's get started. Let's talk about the best books I read this year. starting off with On Writing by Stephen King. I read this right after I graduated college. I actually think it was in a reading vlog on my channel, so if you want to go see me from another life, you can go watch that. This is pretty much the only book about the craft of writing that I have actually enjoyed. I had to read quite a few for undergrad, and I found them all to be pretty dense and accessible and very heady, like describing concepts that I didn't exactly grasp. But On Writing, Stephen King, like, however you feel about him, he clearly knows what he's talking about when it comes to writing. He's sold millions and millions of books, and he knows a thing or two about like accessible, good, solid writing. And he illustrates it here. It is half memoir and half memoir of the craft, if you will. And I just think the memoir portion of this is really fun and interesting. And if you are like a lifelong Stephen King reader like me, you will find it interesting. Also, if I sound bad or I'm sniffly, coughing, I just had the flu, so sorry about that. Anyways, I found the craft portion of this book to be extremely helpful, very motivating. It just demystifies writing in such a great way. I really appreciated it. And I don't have too much to say about this one, honestly, except like, it's just a really solid book about writing. I took a little break from writing after the storm, hoping to get back into it. I'm also going to do a reread of this because it was that helpful for me. Next up, I want to talk about Made for Love by Alyssa Nutting. This book was wild. I think I only ended up giving it 4 stars, maybe 4.5, but it needs to be on here just because out of all of the books I'm going to talk about today, this is the most similar to like what I want to do as a writer. It follows, there's a couple different like threads going on that come together. It's like, there's like a woman running away from her like Elon Musk type husband that has implanted a chip in her head and wants them to like meld their brains together, basically. She's on the run from him. She's staying in a trailer park with her dad, who has this like relationship with this like blow up sex doll. There's also a character who his life is completely ruined because he has like a sexual obsession with dolphins. And it all takes place in Florida, of course. And if you don't know, I love Florida. I love books about Florida. I love writing a book about Florida, which is, you know, a project I have on the back burner. But I read this as comparative research for my Florida book. And come on, I loved it. It is just so wacky. All of the threads come together perfectly. It's, you know, some people, I was reading the reviews and some people thought the like satire was a little on the nose, or maybe we're like too close to this like time where, you know, there's this Elon Musk type guy. I think his last name is like Gogol or whatever. You know, it's a little on the nose. It's very similar to the world we are living in, but I think it's funny. I think it's pertinent. I'd really like to read some of Alyssa Nutting's other books, but I haven't gotten around to them yet. But wow, I just really liked this one. I had so much fun with it, and I just had to put it on this list because of that. It's kind of what I aspire to do in my writing. So, had to mention it here. Okay, I am a big middle grade reader, so I would like to talk about a couple middle grade picks, starting with The Accursed Vampire by Madeline McGrain. This was such a great book. I have to, you know, I gave it 5 stars, but I have to put it on the list also because of how many times I have recommended it to people. At my job, I work at a toy store and we carry books, and I, you know, help with ordering specifically of the books, shockingly. And I recommended The Accursed Vampire to so many kids and their parents this year, and it always went over really, really well. And I love that I had such a good time reading this. I know so many people my age that have had a great time reading this, and that kids love it too. It is about a genderless vampire child named Dragoslava and a couple of their vampire friends on adventures. They've been friends for centuries, and Dragoslava is cursed by a witch, hence the name, the Accursed Vampire, and, you know, has been cursed to do her bidding, basically, for centuries, I'm pretty sure. And we're following them and their friends on this story as they go to the Midwest to find this, you know, to find somebody that has this book, this grimoire that the witch wants back, and blah, 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 blah. The story, honestly, is less important to me than these adorable characters. I love Dragoslava. I love how this... Oh, there's deer! I don't know if you guys can see, but there's deer. Wow. Anyways, I love how this book embraces how, like, chaotic and kind of evil children can be in a way that I really think is endearing and I appreciate. This book doesn't shy away from that and lets these kids, even though they are vampire kids, lets these vampire kids be up to no good and lets them be sneaky and funny and snarky. And I just really, really like that. I also really, really appreciated how casually queerness was integrated into this book. Dragoslava is a little genderless vampire child, uses they, them pronouns. It is never addressed, and I really like that. There's also a vampire witch lesbian couple that kind of takes these children in, and that's also like treated super casually, and I just really, really like that. I also loved the sequel to this, but wanted to mention the first one because the first one stood out to me a little more. The art style is also super adorable. I really, really love this graphic novel. If you like graphic novels, middle grade, vampires, evil little vampire children, check this one out. Next, I want to talk about Dear Moth Man by Robin Gao, which is another middle grade novel. This follows a trans kid, Noah, who is writing letters to Moth Man to cope with the loss of his trans best friend, which is super fucking sad. This book is really heavy at times and really sad, but really sweet and hopeful and endearing, and I really, really enjoyed it. It has stuck with me ever since. It is definitely one of my new favorite middle grade reads. I just think it is such an important book. So we're following Noah, who's writing these letters to Moth Man to like cope with the death of his friend. He is, I think he's in like 6th grade here. He's like recently realized that he's trans and has changed his name to Noah, but was only out to his friend who passed away suddenly in like a car accident. And so he's, you know, the two of them really bonded over cryptids and, you know, being into the paranormal and creepy stuff. And in the absence of his friend, he starts trying to contact Mothman because he, you know, sees this inherent queerness and otherness in this creature and thinks that maybe they could be friends, that they could relate to each other, which is just so touching to me as a queer kid, former queer kid who was obsessed with cryptids. This was just such a sweet book. I felt for Noah through the entire story. Not just because I related to him, but I think this does a really great job at trans representation for kids. He's trans and autistic, which he has no problem with talking about that, which is really great. And he doesn't like hate himself for being trans, which I think is great. He is just kind of scared of how other people are going to react and, you know, knows that this is sensitive information to share with people. But we get to follow Noah as he like slowly becomes more comfortable being himself. He kind of starts to come out of this like deep grief and make new friends and become accepted by them, which is just really sweet to watch. I listened to the audiobook for this and really, really enjoyed it. This is definitely a new favorite middle grade for me. And if you're a middle grade reader or you know a kid who might be going through some similar things, it's definitely a heavier book, but I think it's really important. I think it has some really good representation, and I really love this one. I'm definitely going to return to it. Another graphic novel I would like to talk about is The Chromatic Fantasy by H.A., which I really, really loved. I don't think this will be for everybody, but it came to me just when I needed it. It takes place in like a loosely medieval time period that's pretty flexible, as you will see. It follows a trans man who is like stuck in this life as a nun. He makes a deal with the devil to, you know, release him from this and like let him live his authentic life. And so he escapes it's not called a nunnery, is it? He escapes the church, and, you know, just gets, you know, caught up in this life of like debauchery and, you know, lying, stealing, thieving, having fun, and is really loving his life. This deal with the devil, though, has kind of turned into some like pseudo-sexual, I mean, I think definitely sexual relationship with the devil, in exchange for his like freedom. He, you know, is constantly under control by the devil, which is pretty crazy. Devil basically owns his soul forever now, but he got freedom from the church, so it kind of feels like a fair trade. Anyways, he's living his life. He meets Casper, another trans man, and the two of them fall in love, go on misadventures. Who knows what'll happen? It's fun, it's sexy. The art style is really, really great. It very much evokes like stained glass imagery. I like the murky time of it. I think is really fun and really works here. It's just a fun gay time. I don't think it's gonna be for everybody because it is like aggressively queer, very trans, and its humor as well. So I think, you know, that might read as cringe to some people. I also like, it's pretty episodic in a way, and I think some people might read that as like scattered, but I really liked it. It came to me at a point I really needed it, and I had a good time. So I'm putting it here on my list. Another extremely gay book is Idlewild by James Frankie Thomas, a book which I loved. It is just so messy and queer and relatable. I loved this one. We're following Faye and Nell, two friends who are attending this like funky Quaker high school in Manhattan, and their super unconventional and obsessive relationship with each other. It is described as a queer, trans, and early internet twist on the Manhattan prep school novel. It takes place, I think it might start on 9/11. It happens very early on in the plot. I think Faye and Nell actually meet on 9/11 or like become aware of each other. Anyway, so that's when it takes place. We're following these guys in high school. We're also, I think it's framed through them looking back on this time of their lives now that they aren't friends anymore and do not talk. So like from the beginning, we know that like this friendship was destined to break. And I have been through similar friendships like that in my younger life. And so I love reading about that personally. Faye is obsessed with gay men. Nell is obsessed with Faye. And they bond over obsessing over their peers' sexualities. Of course, this is all just hiding their own complicated gender and sexualities. Faye ends up being a trans guy. Unsurprising to me. I just really, really liked this one. I loved following Faye's like gender journey. I also found out after reading this book that James Frankie Thomas, the author, didn't intend for it to be a trans book and didn't identify as trans until writing this book, and that like really comes through in a way that I really appreciated. I just think Faye's character like perfectly captures how sometimes as like a trans person you like think that everybody's gender identity is like perfectly valid and super great, understandable, except for yours. Yours doesn't make sense for some reason, and yours is unacceptable. And I think it just captured that feeling very, very well. I just love this kind of novel too, where it just like, you know, shows us these two messy best friends and tells us how it all fell apart. This was just right up my alley. It was made for me, and I really, really enjoyed it. Also loved the like early 2000s period piece in a way. So Idlewild was awesome. Would definitely recommend. Next up, I do have some books that I actually own. So let's talk about it. I have two books on here from Tananarive Due, who is one of my favorite authors. Her book, The Reformatory, was like my favorite book last year. So when I saw these at the bookstore, I had to pick them up, starting with The Wishing Pool and Other Stories. This was not on my radar at all. I didn't know this had come out a couple years ago. So glad I loved it. This is like my ideal story collection. If anybody has any other story collections that feel similar to this one, please let me know. I just love Tananarive Due. I love what she does. I feel like she just gets me. She knows what I want in a story. This was just a super solid collection. It is a perfect blend of horror and sci-fi, Afrofuturism at times. This collection is haunted specifically by themes of generational trauma, racism, and the uncertain, bleak future of humanity, which was just all handled so well here. It is split into sections. My favorite section were the Gracetown stories, which all take place in the same town as her book, The Reformatory, that I loved last year, is set in. So of course I loved that. And that it just further explores how that town is just like forever haunted by what happened there. I initially had this down as a 4-star collection when I finished it, because not every story in this blew me away. But like when I was writing the script, I was like, this is exactly what I want. Like, I wish I could read this again. I wish that there were more collections coming out like this. So I decided to bump it up to a 5-star. I wrote down a couple little selling points of my favorite stories from this collection that I'll share with you. Incident at Bear Creek Lodge is a really eerie, snowy cabin story where a kid goes to visit his estranged grandmother, only to find out why his mother wants nothing to do with her. It also won the World Fantasy Award, as you can see on the cover. Last Stop on Route 9 follows two siblings driving through a remote area of Florida, and they slip through time. Supper Time was one of my absolute favorites of the whole collection. It is a creepy swamp monster story that takes place in early 1900s Florida. All I could ever want. Rumpus Room, which follows a woman trying to win back custody of her daughter. She's helped by a benevolent stranger when he lets her stay in his rumpus room. Things get scary when she realizes he's hiding something. And One Day Only. In a time only defined as soon, Naima lives in a deserted post-pandemic Malibu after most of the population has died from a virus. She decides to put on a comedy show for the few survivors. This is just such a wonderful story collection. If you haven't read Tananarive Due's book, if you're a horror sci-fi reader, please check this out. I love everything she does. I don't know what else to say here. I loved this collection. Even the stories that like weren't perfect, I still appreciated them. And yeah, can't wait to read more of Tananarive Due. Here is my other Tananarive Due book that I loved this year, and that is The Between. The lighting in this video is pretty bad. I'm doing my best here. Anyways, I saw this little edition at Barnes & Noble a couple months ago, and I love books that are this size, guys. Like, this is the ideal size of a book for me. It's a mass market paperback. I love mass market paperbacks. I love a book that I can just throw in my bag, beat up, bring wherever. This fits in my fucking pocket, dude. Like, I wish every book was this size. So, anyways, saw it at Barnes & Noble. I was like, oh, I love Tananarive Due. I've kind of been meaning to read this. I picked it up and read the back. Hilton was 7 when his grandmother died, and it was a bad time. But it was worse when she died again. Absolutely. I'm sold. I didn't realize this was like a subgenre until I heard somebody else say this in a YouTube video, describing Our Wives Under the Sea, calling it a came back wrong story. And it clicked that is like one of my favorite subgenres of horror, because I'm so scared of that, and I love it in horror when somebody comes back different and changed. And this happens here. This follows Hilton, who we're mostly following him when he is in like his 30s, his late 30s, I would say, I think. Dealing with the events of his childhood, where he has this like memory just like nagging at him that he can't get rid of, and it keeps coming through to him in dreams, even though he's tried so hard to repress it. This memory of finding his grandma dead, going to find help, coming back, and she was alive. And from that moment on, things were different with her. A year or so after that, he got caught in like a rip current at the beach. She went out and saved him, and she died for real that time. And he has always had such like, you know, weird conflicting feelings about this, where it's like he feels very responsible for her death, her, you know, eventual death, the real one, I guess. He feels very responsible because she saved him, but he also feels just like so fucking weird about all of this, where it's like, did that actually happen? Am I making that up? What does this even mean if she died twice? So we're following him as he, you know, was adopted, he grew up, and now he has a family of his own, which is another thread that's going on in this book. His wife, who is the only Black judge in Dade County, Florida, is receiving racist hate mail that's threatening her, her family. They have 2 children. That is another thread that's happening in this book while he is dealing with his past. He feels like he is like living on borrowed time. His life is just like, he's being plagued by these nightmares. With this and the hate mail that his wife is receiving, his life just becomes like this stress-filled waking nightmare as he tries to figure out what the fuck is going on for him. I really love media that is just like following people down this descent into stress, especially when it comes to like this like figuring out childhood trauma. And this just really resonated with me. I love Tananarive writing. I just think she did such a good job here. This is also her first novel, which is just insane to me. Everything this woman writes is fantastic. If you're a horror reader and you haven't read Tananarive, once again, please go out, do yourself a favor. This is just like the perfect kind of horror for me. It feels so rooted in reality. There's just this deep feeling of dread throughout this entire book. There's something is so wrong, but you can't put your finger on it, and you just need to read to the end to get to the bottom of it and figure out what's going on. I loved this. Now we're down to our last 2 books, and these are my top 2 books of the year. So this is Private Rights by Julia Armfield, who is another one of my favorite authors. Her book, Our Wives Under the Sea, is like one of my favorite books of all time. So I was extremely excited that this book was coming out this year. I ordered it from the UK so I could have it early. And I think one of the reasons this hit me so hard is because of when I read it. It came to me at like an incredibly topical time. I will explain. So this is a retelling of King Lear, which I didn't even know that until very recently. I have not read King Lear. You don't need to. But now that I am reading the synopsis out loud, I'm like, oh, obviously. We're following 3 estranged sisters after the death of their father, of their like extremely rich architect father. And, you know, he's they're reading the will, Really what is going on here though, this takes place in a like, very similar to the Tananarive where it's like soon, in a world plagued by climate disaster where it has been raining for years and years and years. And everybody just has to go about their normal lives. There is also another subplot in here of like some creepy like ritual stuff going on. That's a whole other thing. Why it struck me so much was that I read this the day of Hurricane Helene, when my power was out, my signal was out. I had no idea what was going on in my area. I had no idea that my life was going to be changed forever. And I just wanted to sit down and read this book that I was really excited about. And it happened to be a rainy, cozy day. So I was excited. Couple days after, when I got signal and realized that everything was fucked, this book really took on a new light for me. So the constant background throughout this is, you know, while these sisters are fighting over these trivial things and their father's will and figuring out who's going to get the house that he built and all of this, while this is happening, everything is going, like, the world is fucking ending around them. And, you know, they are just focusing on their fights and how they have to go to work and their new relationships and what they're going to eat for dinner. And it really, really spoke to me, especially with what I have been going through and what Appalachia has been going through, that capitalism and our like little fucking fights with each other are going to grip onto us until the very end, even though the world is falling apart. And it just really, really connected with me for that reason. I do think there are other things to take away from this book, but because of my experience, when I read this, when I still had that innocence of not knowing what was happening in Appalachia, I just kind of like can't believe that I read this when I did. It feels extremely personal. And for that, and I think, you know, I love Julia Armfield. I would have loved this if that hadn't happened, but holy shit. I don't know when I'll be able to return to this book, honestly, because of that. Because now it kind of does feel like deeply emotionally painful. But Private Rights, pretty crazy. Moving on. I just don't know how to end that one. I'm like, I don't know if people are going to connect with this like I did, but... And last but not least, this will not come as a surprise to you if you watched my last video. My favorite book of the year is Stone Butch Blues by Leslie Feinberg. I deeply, deeply related to this book. I really, really loved it. It kind of like unlocked a whole new level of self-expression for me. I think everybody should read this book, especially if you are a lesbian or sapphic. Leslie Feinberg, it was one of her goals to make this book available for everybody. So it is free online. You can also order it for like $20, I think, and have it sent to you. So it's a little tricky to find, like you won't find it at bookstores, but if you know where to go, which I just told you where to go, you can read it. You should read it. It's a bit of a semi-autobiographical work from Leslie Feinberg, who was a trans lesbian activist. I know that it's not explicitly autobiographical though. It mirrors and takes inspiration from many other butch lesbians from that era. In this book, we follow Jess, who is a young butch growing up pre-Stonewall in the 1950s. It is pretty intense and pretty heavy, so like please do a full trigger warning read before you dive into this one. But I think it's really important. Some people, of course, some assholes in reviews were like, this is trauma porn, and I'm just like, no, like this is what actually fucking happened to people and like still does happen today to butch lesbians. So I would disagree with that. I think it's just important to read. But anyways, we follow Jess throughout her life as, you know, she's kind of figuring out who she is, finding the lesbian community, eventually transitioning socially to a man, to hoping to have like an easier, I don't know, like a more realized life. But that comes with its own set of problems, which is discussed. And I just think it is a really honest look at what trans life looks like for some people, especially for the butch lesbian community. It has been really inspirational to me, especially with this next political administration on its way. It is a queer, lesbian, butch dyke, working class classic. If you consider yourself any of those things, you should check it out. It showed me that, you know, people like me have existed for a long time, and even though things have been hard, it is possible to get through it through community and activism, and it was just extremely inspirational to me. I am planning a reread. I have been going through a, like, you know, self-discovery journey this year for sure, and by that I mean transitioning, and it was just like, it kind of spurred all of this on for me, and I am incredibly grateful for that. And it's hard to describe that to you and why that is so important, but that's why this book is my #1 book of the year. I loved it, and I can't wait to read it again. I love you, Leslie Feinberg. Rest in peace. Absolute icon. I've been talking for a long time, and I don't know if anybody's even watching at this point, but let's just do a lightning round really quick of the 5 bad books, the 5 worst books I read this year. And thankfully, it was hard to really put together 5 that I despised. These are ones that just did not work for me. Number 5, The Scary Book of Christmas Lore by Tim Rayborn. Kind of a nothing book. It is exactly what it sounds like. It collects, you know, creatures and folkloric figures from different cultures centered around Christmas, the Yuletide, and puts them together in a book. Why it is on this list, though, guys, this pissed me off so bad as a former folklore student. No bibliography. There's no bibliography in this. No sources. No research. Which is bad for so many reasons. I'm just like, are we letting anybody write books now? Because you cannot write a nonfiction folklore index without giving me any fucking sources. It is entirely comprised of other cultures that are not this author's. And he's like, just take my word for it. This could entirely be copied Wikipedia articles, and I would be none the wiser. So the book itself wasn't that bad. It was kind of a nothing book. But the fact that it had no bibliography pissed me off enough to be on this list. Not good. Number 4, The Lost World by Michael Crichton. I don't know, guys. This was just a letdown. I read Jurassic Park this year. I had a great time. I'm not a classy reader a lot of the time. My standards can be pretty low. But this one just sucked. It had a lot of the same characters from the first Jurassic Park, but they all acted so much dumber. All of the characters were so much dumber than they were in the first one, and that just pissed me off. And honestly, that was my main issue with it, was that the actions that these characters took made no fucking sense. And it was kind of a slog to get through, and the first one was not. It was super exciting. That's what I gotta say about The Lost World. Number 3, Shark Night by R.L. Stine. I was so excited for this release because if you know me, I love sharks. I love R.L. Stine. This was very exciting, and it's a new book from R.L. Stine. It's not a Goosebumps book, but like it basically is. Anyways, dude, what is like R.L. Stine? I don't even know if he wrote this, you know. I'm like hoping it was a ghostwriter. It just made me sad. It was just so lame. It like follows this kid who is, you know, getting, you know, put in a Shark Tank to film a Shark Week special or whatever, which like would never happen because it is highly illegal, but that's fine. Anyways, what really got me about this was just like how Goosebumps, like, I feel does not work in the modern day, unfortunately. Like, it just had like constant allusions to Fortnite and Netflix and Xbox, and not to sound like an old person, but damn, that made me so depressed. I just didn't like it. I thought it was boring. I thought it was just like an amalgamation of a bunch of Goosebumps books that have already come out, and it just didn't work for me. I had a whole reading vlog planned around this. I was gonna do another Shark Week reading vlog because I had fun last time I did it. And this book depressed me so much that I canceled the whole vlog. So, next up, we got Those Across the River by Christopher Buehlman. This was a werewolf book that I just suffered through. I thought it was super boring. It was marketed to me as a Southern Gothic werewolf story, and I was like, sign me up. I love those things. And I'm currently writing a bit of a Southern Gothic werewolf story, so I was like, let's do some comparative research. Showed me what I don't want to do, which I guess I do appreciate. It follows a man who moves to a sleepy southern town to write a history of his family's plantation, which I just like, I don't know. I thought maybe it would provide some kind of insightful commentary on that, like what it's like to have, you know, such horrific things happen in your family history. Of course it didn't. Like, you know when you read a book and you're like, this is only for white guys? Like, that's how I felt about this. A white man writing racial slurs. It's got that. A female character who only exists to die tragically. Oh yeah. Mediocre sex scenes peppered throughout. Absolutely. Boring werewolves? Yes. All of those and more in Those Across the River. I just didn't like it. I've heard other people really liked this book and it just did not work for me. It was a big letdown and it was pretty offensive at that. Last but not least, we have The Woods All Black by Lee Mandello, which I feel bad about this, honestly. This is the second time I've read a Lee Mandello book only to be extremely disappointed. So I'm like, I guess I just have to stop at this point. It's tough because I feel like me and Lee Mandello, we have a lot in common. We're interested in the same things. We're both gay people. We both like literature. We both, I don't know, everything that he writes about, I read the back of the book and I'm like, this is made for me. And if you've been a long time watcher, you might remember I fucking hated Summer Sons, unfortunately. Another book that I was like, this is for me. It's about like, you know, two gay boys, folklore, college, whatever. I was super excited. No. Hated that. And I really, really did not like this one. I don't know. He's got these setups that I am super, super interested in. The settings are great. The themes are great. This one was sold to me as equal parts historical horror, trans romance, and blood-soaked revenge, all set in 1920s Appalachia. Come on! Right up my alley, right? No. No. Just like Summer Sons, he takes this great premise and just explores the dullest parts of it. I just don't get it. We follow a trans nurse that comes to a small Appalachian town to vaccinate and support the community. Of course, since it's the 1920s, he hasn't transitioned yet, and so, you know, the townspeople all view him as just like this weird woman. He meets another person like him. Romance, ? Ensues. And also there is a scary creature in the woods, I guess. This whole thing is like less than 200 pages, I think. Something around there. It is very underdeveloped. The romance did not work for me. Nothing happened until like the last 25% of the book, and that shit was crazy, guys. I gotta spoil some stuff here. Anyways, our main character, Leslie, constantly refers to his love interest as younger, more inexperienced, which just like doesn't have to be bad, but doesn't make me feel sexy personally. I don't think an age gap has to be like inherently problematic, but this one was like very undefined. Like we don't know, I don't think we know how old the love interest was. I don't even think we know how old Leslie is. So the fact that it was just always referenced was just kind of weird to me. Turns out the love interest is the creature in the woods. And this whole fucking book, dude, is just a vehicle for a monster fucking scene that happens in the last like 20 pages of the book. It felt so unnecessary. I did not see it coming at all. I'm not a prude, guys, but it just didn't work. And it was like, I think the sex was pretty poorly written. Like, I'm not a prude. I'm literally writing a trans werewolf novel right now. I'm not a prude. I know a thing or two. But it just feels like it felt like I got tricked into like reading a fan fiction at the very end. It was so abrupt. It wasn't sexy. It was so weird. I just hated it. I can't believe this got published by a mass distributor. I can't believe that this like monster porn is just out there. And like, not that I don't think people should be, people can read whatever they want. I just feel it was not fairly advertised whatsoever. Like, when I see these kind of crazy monster books and like Ice Planet Barbarians and stuff, like, you know what you're getting into. This, I did not. It was not a romance. It was so underdeveloped. I also was like, I didn't really like the way the transness was represented in here. You might remember that I really liked the Chromatic Fantasy by H.A., which was also set in the past and also had trans characters. It worked there for me because this book, it was like a lot looser and fun. This was trying to take itself really, really seriously, but because of the time it was set in, the trans portrayals here just did not feel very accurate. Of course, trans people existed in the 1920s, but these characters were so like realized and sure of themselves in a way that I think felt pretty unrealistic for the time. Like, we don't get to follow their gender journeys at all. They were like fully formed before the beginning of this book. And that feels so unrealistic for the time for me. Like, of course I don't want these guys to suffer and feel dysphoric and terrible all the time, but like, I don't know, a little bit feels period accurate, right? Like, they just had very like modern attitudes towards their gender that I just thought was kind of weird. It just didn't work for me. Anyways, another Lee Mandello I didn't like. I feel bad because I really want to like this guy's stuff. I feel like we have similar interests. If you have any recommendations for like other T for T historical romance, please drop in the comments though, because that's what I was really wanting out of this and I just did not get it. And that's okay. So those are the best and worst books that I read this year. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much. Feel free to like, subscribe if you want. I would love to hear in the comments what you thought about any of these books. If you have any recommendations for me based on these books, or if you read them, did you love them? Did you hate them? I'd love to know. But yeah, thank you so much for coming along. Even though things have been so crazy for me lately, reading has been such a place of solace in my life, and I'm really looking forward to reading more this year, sharing this more with y'all this year. And if you watched a super long video, I appreciate you. Thank you so much, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.